over-caffeinated and unprepared. Let's do this. You guys, we have the first 5-star of the year, and we are only halfway through January. I just finished reading This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel. I stayed up until like 3 a.m. last night reading this book because it's fucking incredible, and I was sobbing the whole time. And we're going to talk about it. But first, my name is Logan, and welcome to the Bi Book Boy. If you're new here, I am a chaotic bisexual, and I read books. Let's do it. This book revolves around gender identity and transitioning and like just shit like that. So if you're easily triggered, please leave. Don't do this to yourself. However, stick around for like 2 seconds because I am going to do like a general overview of this book and why I think everyone in this day and age needs to read this novel because it's fucking incredible. So yeah, stick around for that. But then afterwards, I'm going to talk spoilers, so I'll tell you when to dip, because trauma is not necessary. Although this book really isn't sad. It's not, like, traumatic. It's just very emotional and very, like, cut to the heart of the issue, like, deep shit. Apparently I cry when I think deep thoughts. Brief overview so you know what I'm talking about. This book follows the character Poppy and their family. Poppy is a little girl who was actually born Claude, but at the age of 5 discovers that they are actually Poppy. They are not a little boy, they are a little girl who was born in the wrong body, and that is who they want to be. And Poppy is lucky enough to be born in probably the most accepting family in the United States, in that her father is a stay-at-home dad who is an author, and just so incredible. And her mother is a doctor who is very accepting and very informed about, like, just life and what real life is. Thusly, Poppy's parents make a series of accommodations and try to make her transition as easy as possible at a young age, so much so that for a long time, Poppy doesn't even realize that this is an odd thing to go through. This book explores the way that the entire family evolves around her and just really asks the hard questions there. I really appreciate this book so much. There are a few reasons why I think everyone should read this book. It's marketed like a young adult book, but this is definitely not a young adult book. Yes, it deals with a young adult character, but the story is actually told from the point of view of Rosie and Penn, who are Poppy's parents, and I think that's a very powerful choice on the author's choice, because Laurie Frankel, whose daughter is also a trans girl, I think she really made the important decision in that instead of trying to write from the point of view of a trans youth and risk doing things that just really aren't accurate and such, she wrote from the point of view that she understood, which was the parent of a trans youth. I really enjoy that perspective because it allows for the parents to talk about deeper things while leaving Poppy not innocent, but as a child and as herself, and like just allowing Poppy to be Poppy and not trying to explain her. A beautiful thing about this book is it's almost, the prose is just gorgeous. It's very flowy and very narrative driven. An important factor of the story is Penn, Poppy's dad, is an author, and he has this tradition that with Poppy and her 4 older brothers growing up, he always told them a bedtime story going to bed, and he, as an author, made up this fairy tale in which the children are the main characters, and he uses it as like a way to not so subtly teach the kids life lessons, and it's adorable. But thusly, because of that, Laurie Frankel did a really wonderful thing in that she made her writing style almost like an old-timey fairy tale, and that it really feels like you're reading like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland, or it's one of those voices that is narratively driving this, which I think is really important because it's a voice that is safe for all ages to read, talking about a subject that we usually would reserve for like young adult or older subjects. However, it's in a voice that is safe and trustworthy for people of all ages, because this is not something that only affects people that are 18 and older. These questions being asked in this book are questions that they affect the youth of today, and most importantly affect the trans youth that are having to ask these questions and ask these questions of their parents and of the people in general. It's really good. Along the fairy tale theme, I would say, of this book is Penn, the father, is telling the children a fairy tale. He is crafting his own reality, and he is making a perfect, safe world for all of their children. And his approach to Poppy and raising Poppy is very much, we're going to move schools, we're going to immediately embrace everything, and we're going to make this world so perfect for her that she doesn't even realize that this isn't something that every child goes through at some point. It's the Love Simon approach, I'm going to call it, to life, in that we create this perfect world that doesn't exist today, but we would love to be the future. The world that Penn wants his daughter to grow up in is the world that I wish existed, in which gender was not a question when raising a child, and sexuality was not one of the first things that people saw, and it wasn't considered taboo if someone was LGBTQIA+, etc. They're just people. Everyone is just people, which is inherently true, and we as a community know it is true. However, the rest of the world is not there yet. Laurie, however, takes the approach of wanting to prepare her daughter for the hard times that are coming, in that she is still accepting and wanting to prepare her child for everything best as possible, but she also desperately wants to protect her child from all of the struggles that are going to happen, because she knows that the world is a sad and dangerous place, especially for trans youth. And she is struggling with the questions of, do we create this world where Poppy is Poppy and there's no questions asked, or do we help Poppy understand that she has choices to make in her life, and she has, no matter which choice she makes, there's going to be repercussions, and we are there to support her and help her through it. However, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be a very hard life, because sadly, that fairy tale world is not where we live. It is where we could live one day, but it's not where we live right now, and we have to deal with reality. I think one reason why that's so important is because that is a question that all parents, no matter they be parents, all parents, no matter whether their child is queer or is straight, all parents have to ask that of how they're going to raise their children. It's something that all parents can identify with, and I think all people that want to be parents someday can identify with, and it's a very important question when approaching how do we support our children and create a world that is better for them. The other idea that is really prevalent here is that, so backstory, when Claude, Poppy was born Claude, when Claude first starts to dress as Poppy and present female and such, there's a lot of backlash at school. The family, Poppy's family moves from Wisconsin to Seattle, and when they move to Seattle, since nobody knows them, they restart and create life as not this is Poppy who used to be Claude, but this is our daughter Poppy. But thusly, they do move to create that perfect world in which she is protected for a little bit, and she is just herself and no one asks questions, and eventually she is outed. Eventually her secret is found out like years into the future, and she is outed, and it poses this really wonderful question, long story too late, of no matter how perfect of a parent you are, you can only protect your child from so much, and it is more important to be there for them when they do go through the struggles and the trials of life and things like that, rather than shield them from everything possible. That's all I'm going to say in the non-spoiler section, because I'm about to get very passionate and talk spoilers and details. If you are easily triggered by topics of being outed, or, you know, trauma in that side, or if you just want to read this book without any spoilers, hop off now, leave a comment below, because I want to interact with the YouTube algorithm, because this book is really fucking important and it needs to be shared throughout the booktube community. Yeah, go read this, move this to the top of your TBR, and I want to hear what your thoughts are, so comment below, and like and subscribe, etc. Now let's get into spoilers. My favorite thing is that Poppy chose her name, and one of the things that really made me cry is that Rosie, the mother, was an only child, but initially she was raised, initially she had a younger sister named Poppy who died when she was young. And there's this story of like the story before Poppy is born. There's this story of like they desperately wanted a child. They desperately wanted a daughter so she could have her Poppy and name her daughter Poppy, and they keep having boys. And they eventually, when Claude learns that she is indeed Poppy, Poppy makes the decision to be called Poppy, but it made me cry and I loved it. Also, the 4 boys are incredible. The 4 older brothers are kind of the best older brothers that a little girl could ever ask for. Ben is just the sweetest older brother, and like Rue and Rigel are and Orion are so cute. The twins are just my favorite, and Rue is just such a sweet little older protected brother who goes through like an angsty stage, and like it's very good. Every member of this family had a unique voice, and I could not only see them, but I could hear them, and I could see the way they were interacting with each other in my head, and it was just beautiful. I love that Penn and Rosie have a non-conventional relationship, in that Rosie is a night shift doctor in the ER, so she's bringing home the bacon, and Penn is an author and a stay-at-home dad, and Penn's the one that like cooks and like puts them to bed and like reads them or tells them bedtime stories. I just love it. I absolutely love that dynamic. They are such good parents. They are there for their children no matter what, and it's really wonderfully created, and I wish that the world was that safe. Something that I really love that she establishes really fast is before Penn and Rosie even get married, like before they have kids or anything, they're just dating. And she really makes an effort to establish that these two have a really solid, loving relationship as parents before she introduces the rest of the family. Penn is like, early on in them dating, Penn goes and sits in the ER and writes while Rosie is working in the ER in her night shift, and it's really cute. But he has this revelation where he says on page 19, sick kids defiled all narrative theory he had ever known. There was nothing redemptive about a child dying, and there was nothing that can be learned from a kid coming in shot or beaten up that made it worth a kid getting shot or beaten up. This had always pissed him off about Romeo and Juliet. Its ending platitude that at least the feud was laid to rest, and the fighting families had come together, as if this somehow made it worth losing their teenagers, as if Romeo and Juliet would have been willing to die just so that their parents would get along. It's really important. And I love that, because that's always pissed me off about Romeo and Juliet too, is I'm like, that doesn't make it better. Anyway, though, it goes on to say that Penn took her hand gently and said, Romeo and Juliet didn't give a crap whether their parents got along. Sure. Eyes closed, probably not even listening. In fact, Romeo and Juliet thought it was kind of sexy that their parents hated each other. Well, who wouldn't, Rosie said. They weren't willing to die to put an end to the feud. They were willing to do anything to live. Juliet died so they could live, and Romeo killed so they could live. Rosie nodded. What's your point? There's nothing good that can come out of a child being sick. No. There's nothing that makes that fair or worth it. No, there isn't. It's narratively insupportable, Penn explained. It's weird how little narrative theory there is in hospitals, Rosie said. Yours might be all there is. Then it's good I'm here, Penn said. That discussion about Romeo and Juliet being a dumb, like the ending of the play being dumb and being like, well, their parents are better, so it's fine that they died, is that's not necessarily touched on. It really lays the groundwork for Penn and Rosie's approach to parenting, and that they really try to keep their children safe, because there really isn't anything good that comes out of children suffering, and anybody who says that there is something good that comes out of children suffering is a dick. Anyway, though, at the beginning, they have a deal that Claude wears boy clothes to school and then a dress at home. After the formal dress conversation happens, they start letting Claude wear dresses to school, and eventually heels, and makeup and such. And children start talking, and there's immediately the teachers are being weird and asking about like bathroom conversations and such. And then eventually Claude goes to a play date. And said play date happens, and the father of the kid who Claude goes to the play date with is super homophobic and awful, and actually threatens the parent, threatens Rosie and Penn. And due to that and some other things, Rosie and Penn decide to move, and they move to a new school in Seattle instead of Wisconsin. At this point, Claude had grown her hair out and was identifying as Poppy now, because they've had that conversation, and is wearing dresses all the time and just dressing the way that she wants to dress. So they just introduce her as Poppy to the parents, and it's just a fact that they have 4 boys and a girl, and time goes on, etc. But anyway, when Poppy is in the 5th grade, she is outed through a series of, the secret is revealed in a couple of ways, and it's really sad, and I'm not going to spoil it. But anyway, there's this doctor that Rosie has been calling, that Rosie calls for advice all the time, because said doctor is understanding of the LGBT community and works with like parenting young LGBT youth. And there's a discussion around just the LGBT youth in general, and the purpose for the community, and the reason that there even is a community, that I really want to discuss. And I don't know how I feel about this, but it's an interesting question to be posed, so I'm going to read it to you guys. But you said don't tell anybody. Rosie tried and failed to keep herself from shrieking. You said it was nobody's business. And that worked beautifully for a little while. You didn't think that was the plan forever, though, did you? Mr. Tongo asked, maddeningly, as if he weren't the advice they'd been following in the first place. 6-year-old Poppy was too young to have to educate her peers, to have to stand up to herself all the time, to have to explain about sex versus sexuality or gender identity versus gender expression. In the 1st grade, we're still trying to teach little boys and little girls that nothing in their pants is appropriate conversation for school. But now she is 10. She's almost off to middle school, almost a teenager, and about to start becoming a grown-up. So it's time for her to explore and decide to be strong, to talk about who she is and stand up for herself and deal with what sets her apart. And how does she do that? Step 1 is come out. Done. However unwillingly. What's step 2? Step 2 is get rejected by lots of people and feel just terrible about it. Also done. What's step 3? Step 3 is where it gets fun. Step 3 is moving on. How long does that take? She sulked. It takes a whole lifetime. Mr. Pongo sounded overjoyed as usual. So it's a good thing she started early. It's really hard. It's the discussion goes longer and raises the question of, yes, while coming out shouldn't be a thing, straight cis male should not be the default that everyone assumes it is. However, right now in society it still is, and coming out is still a necessary process, and it is something that LGBT youth of all shapes, sizes, etc., presentations have to go through, and it's an important part of development. And I think this book really accurately tackles the question of, well, then how do we prepare our child for that? And how is it even possible to prepare our child for that? There's another side of the conversation later that happens between Rosie and Poppy that is a question that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know that the book was trying to pose an answer to it. I think this book I think the ending result of this book is she's not trying to pose answers. She's presenting the idea that there are more options than just two, and there are more questions that should be asked. Rosie and Penn are deciding whether or not to introduce the idea of hormone blockers to prevent Poppy from going through puberty until she has a chance to decide whether she wants to eventually have surgery and have a gender reassignment surgery and go on hormones, or if she wants to develop with the hormones already in her body that would form her body presenting male. This is a medical issue, but mostly it's a cultural issue. It's a social issue and an emotional issue, a family dynamic issue and a community issue. Maybe we need to medically intervene so Poppy doesn't grow a beard, or maybe the world needs to learn to love a person with a beard who goes by she and wears a skirt. But that's not going to happen. Penn spoke so softly. She wouldn't have heard him if she didn't already know what he was going to say. In which case she, and you and I, need to learn to live in a world that refuses to accept a person with a beard who goes by she and wears a skirt, and be happy anyway. Maybe our response to the world should not necessarily be to drug and operate on our daughter. How he looked at her. It felt like a long time since their eyes had met. How what? How do we learn to live in that world and be happy anyway? And it raises, out of context, I realize that quote sounds like the author is advocating to roll over and take it, but that's not what's going on here. The question is being posed, do we, as a community, is it more effective as a community to ignore the problems of the world today and fight for this fairy tale world that we as a community need to create and do need to fight for? Or is it better to work within the system prevented to eventually create said fairy tale world in the long run? And that is not a question that is answered by this book. That is a question that is further explored. In the end, I think what's so great about this book is that the questions posed here are very black and white. However, in the end, it's not a one way is better than the other. It's a we can do both. Why can't we do both? Why can't gender be both and neither at the same time? Why can't sexuality be both and neither at the same time? Why can't expression as a human being be both and neither at the same time? And it's a really wonderful exploration that sometimes we're asking the wrong questions. Something else that I appreciate, most of of Poppy's friends at the end of this, when she goes back to school, it's the Love Simon approach, and that they're very, oh, it wasn't a problem it was just a problem that you didn't tell me, or the very wonderful and fairy tale but sometimes demeaning and annoying response. But that's not all of the friends. Poppy's best friend, Aggie, does have a response of, she doesn't ignore it and act like it's not a discussion that they should have. They, as two best friends, discuss, well, what does this mean for us as best friends? Does this change anything at all? And eventually they come to the conclusion that no, it doesn't change anything at all. And we are still best friends and nothing has changed with our relationship. But I really love that, again, the author took the middle road and presented that there is a third option, rather than the Love Simon approach of, oh, it's not a problem, no one gives a fuck, you don't even need to come out, versus I don't know, the Brokeback Mountain approach, I guess we could say, where it's like coming out is the worst thing that could ever happen and somebody dies because of coming out and shit. I guess spoilers to Brokeback Mountain there, but, you know, rather than like coming out as a death sentence or coming out is not something that should happen and it's completely normal and we're just going to ignore this very vital part of someone's identity, there's a middle road that is taken with this friendship, and I love it in that they're like, yes, this is an important part of your identity that I was unaware of, that I am now becoming aware of and have to understand and learn about and learn to respect. However, that does not mean that our friendship is different. That does not mean that you and I are any less important to each other, and that does not mean that anything has to change in the way that I treat you. Let's still be best friends. And I think that going forward, when discussing coming out stories and LGBT stories in general, I think that approach that this author has taken is something that needs to be taken, because this is the first book that I've read where that approach was taken. It's always the other two. And I really love that there's a third option. I could talk way more about this book and I could read far more quotes, but I'm not going to because I need you to read it and I don't want to spoil it for you. I guess in closing, I'm just saying, please read This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel. Please do it. Tell me what you think about it. As always, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks for sticking around and helping out. Please like and comment and share the video for the YouTube algorithm. And remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can get my videos whenever I decide to post them. Also, at the end of January, By Book Club is reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so look out for that. It's going to be super fun. I stayed up till 3 a.m. last night, so I think I'm going to go back to bed because I look dead. This has been the By Book Boy. I'm saying bye.